Welcome back to the Recharge Zone podcast. I'm your host, Brent Doty. I'm here with my co-host, Ann-Margaret. Hi, Ann-Margaret.
Hi.
And today we have a special guest. Joining us today is Dr. Gizelle Luevano. Giselle, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Gizelle is a senior hydrogeologist here at the Edwards Aquifer Authority and has been with us for quite a while. So, Giselle, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career here at the EAA?
Yes, thank you, Brent. Thank you for having me here today. So back in November 2000, I started off as the records clerk. So I've been here for quite some time. And then in 2001, I was promoted to environmental science technician, and then 2013 coordinator until where I am today. So in my career here at the EAA, I've been taking a lot of water quality samples throughout our jurisdiction and some in the drainage area. So I'm usually out in the field collecting samples for our historical sampling program.
Wow, so Giselle, for 20 plus years, you've been sampling for water quality most of that time. Can you tell us about some of the changes over that time? Types of sites you've sampled, technological advances, or anything else you want to share?
Sure. So our sampling locations have pretty much stayed relevant throughout the 20 years or 20 plus years. I always go to wells, rivers, and springs. So we try to do at least 50 wells throughout the year that are Edwards wells, and then we do the springs biannually, March and September of every year, and that is for our historical sampling and also for the Habitat Conservation Plan program. And then we do the rivers once a year, and there's 8 of the rivers that flow from the drainage into the recharge zone, and we do them in April of every year because we want to know a little bit more about the evaporation signature in those rivers. So in the past, when I first started collecting samples, I would have to have a water quality sonde for pH and temperature. Then I would have another sonde for conductivity, and then another sonde for turbidity, and then another sonde for dissolved oxygen.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Wow.
And then I had another one for the digital titrator. So I would go to a location, and I would have to take all my water quality sondes with me to this one location. And then they all each had their own little probe and then their wire. So I had to be very careful of not stepping over them or tripping over them. So technology has really advanced because today I'm very happy to say that we have a multi-probe, meaning I have one water quality probe that has all of the field parameters that I'm recording, so pH, conductivity, dissolved oxygen, temperature, and the DO. They're all in one sonde. So all I have to do is just put that sonde in my flow chamber, connect it Bluetooth to my phone. Yes. It's so much easier now. And then luckily we have an app that also records my field parameters. So not only am I recording it on my field sheet, it also has a digital backup. So when I come back to the office and if for whatever reason I can't read my writing, I can always go back to my log and say, oh, well, the pH was 7.4 instead of what I wrote 7.35.
Oh yeah, so like quality assurance, quality control kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So a sonde is like I've seen it before. It's like a cylinder, right? That has those little mechanisms that report the things that you just talked about, right?
Correct.
Okay. And that's the thing that you kind of put into the water, and then it sends all of that information and data to your phone.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then once I'm done recording, I can send that log to my Outlook, and then when I come back into the office, it's ready for me to QC my data. So it's really nice. I love it compared to just relying on my field sheet. I can always go back to my digital log and see, that's what I was recording. So it is kind of nice now. And the best part is I don't have to worry about wires like I have in the past. So it's a little bit more safety on that issue. And now the crown jewel of our lab is the AT1000, and it's the automatic titrator.
Uh-huh.
So I did talk about a little bit about the titrator. What we would do in the past, we would go out, collect a sample, run it back in the field in our lab, and it would take me about 10 minutes to get 2 accurate readings because we would digitally titrate a titrator to release the acid and then look at the pH and then figure out if what it was, because it's a mathematical equation that we have to put to figure out our alkalinity. Well, today I have an automatic digital titrator, and it automatically does it for me. All I have to do is just pour the sample in, put the pH probe in there. It automatically fills the bottle with the acid, and it pops out the pH, the total alkalinity, and that's it. I don't have to worry about it. And it takes about 5 minutes for me to get 2 readings versus in the past, which it would take me about 10 minutes. So.
Wow. And so, titration, what is that a fancy word for?
We're basically trying to understand how much acid can go into a sample, which is my
Okay.
field sample, and see how long it takes for it to go acidic. So in the way it has to do with hydrogens, and it's a very
Complex.
complicated.
Okay,
Yes, it
yeah.
is. But the easiest way I can say it is, and you can always correct me, Brian, if I'm wrong, but the easiest way is how much acid can a solution take before it becomes acidic itself?
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah. I'm like going back to the science class, getting like a little bit of schooled in science here.
Yeah, all of these field parameters that Giselle's recording help us to start the analysis of a sample. They help you tell if a sample has reached sort of equilibrium state. So you're not sampling, say, water that's been just sitting in a well column. It helps you
Oh.
tell if you're getting formation water.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because when she starts to sample a well, these numbers from the field parameters, they'll fluctuate.
Uh-huh.
And eventually they'll become stable because you're sampling from the formation itself.
Whoa.
So that's part of the reason we take them.
Cool. So what kind of sites do you currently sample in, and what frequency do you sample them at?
So right now we do about 50 Edwards wells, and it's throughout our jurisdiction, so I can do that throughout the year.
Nice.
If for some reason our samples come back that we think might be inaccurate, we go back out and sample again just to confirm that we are getting the right results. So that's annually. Then I have the springs, which we do.
Those are my favorites.
Yes, those are my favorite too because they're done in March and September of every year. And we sample Comal Springs, San Marcos Springs, Waco Springs if they're flowing, San Antonio and San Pedro if they're flowing.
Okay.
So we do those biannually, and then we do the rivers, which are 8 in our jurisdiction annually, and we do that in May.
Nice, nice. So when you, just because I wanted for our listeners, so sampling at these different springs takes different types of things. So like sampling, can you kind of talk about sampling in San Marcos Springs versus sampling at like the Blue Hole?
Oh, yeah. So for the San Marcos, especially the deep spring that you're talking about, we need to have a barge operator, then we need to have a diver to help us, then we need to have a
So cool.
yes, a peristaltic pump and about 30 feet of hosing to get there. So unfortunately, we ourselves cannot go underneath water to go get the sample. So we have a diver who connects the tubing all the way down to the orifice. So we're still getting, as Brent mentioned, we're still getting formation water from the spring, directly from the spring versus the lake water.
Yes.
So yeah, it's a little bit more of an endeavor, and that is kind of fun because we do go on the lake.
I know, it's so cool.
It is. It's one of the best things I think of. And then versus like Blue Hole, we just walk up there and we submerge our sample into the orifice. So it's not as dramatic as it is at San Marcos.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, so Giselle, you mentioned, sampling up in the contributing zone and out west. How far west do you go?
Usually it's just in our jurisdiction. So I go to Uvalde, Medina, Bear, Comal, and Hayes. So those are the
Okay.
counties that I go to. And there would be some that are still in our jurisdiction, like Guadalupe, that I may have to go to, but it's usually in our jurisdiction.
And the rivers, obviously you're sampling in the contributing zone before they reach the recharge zone and infiltrate because they become losing streams in the recharge zone.
Correct. And then that's one of our ways that we're not being as invasive. So one of the reasons why we go into where that contributing zone you're talking about is because we're getting a really good composition of samples that are going into the recharge zone. So in a way, we're not being as invasive. So
Okay.
it's a little bit more easier for us to go sample the rivers because, people know
Yes.
that we're going to be out there anyways, and they're very friendly with us. So
Yes, that makes sense.
Now talk to us about some of the differences between sampling surface water versus groundwater. Do you need different equipment, different techniques?
Absolutely. So for a well, or like you were mentioning, groundwater, it's totally different than a spring or a river. And you've already mentioned that one of the reasons why we collect parameter readings is to understand if we're definitely in formation water or stagnant water. And that's very important. So when I go to a well, I try to flush it out 3 volumes because, again, I really want the formation water versus stagnant water, like Brent had mentioned. And once the field parameters stabilize, I'm able to collect a sample. So with a spring, I would go into the spring. Well, I wouldn't go into spring, but I would go as close as I could to the orifice and collect from there. And I don't really have to wait 15 minutes for it to stabilize because the spring is always flowing. So once my parameters stabilize, usually 5-6 minutes, then I can start collecting my field parameters and then afterwards sampling. With a river, it's a little bit different, but it's the same concept as a spring. But for the river, I would go downstream of my sampling location. So I'd wade in and then I would face upstream, put my probe in there, record the parameter readings, and then I can collect my samples. But when I collect my samples, I'm always upstream of myself, because again, I want a real good representation of the water versus sampling downstream of me, and maybe something potentially on me, I can contaminate the samples. So that's one of the reasons why we're always sampling upstream of ourselves.
Nice. So why are the reasons that we sample for water quality, and what can people do to protect the quality of water?
So one of the reasons why we go out there and collect samples is to understand the health of the Edwards Aquifer. We also want to know what kind of influences man has on it, because as we all know, the drainage area, which is also the Texas Hill Country, it's very picturesque, it's very rugged, so it attracts us. But also when it attracts us, it attracts waste. So we're trying to figure out what implications or impacts humans have on our aquifer. So that's one of the reasons why we go out there, to see what impact man has had on our aquifer. And, for the 20 plus years I've been here sampling, I can say the water quality is really good.
Nice.
Yes. So yeah, we do see a little bit here and there, but overall the water quality is really good. And we should sustain that for future generations. And I think for us, especially San Antonio and in our jurisdiction, this is a natural resource we have in our own backyard. It's something that we can actually say, we can see it, we can go underground if we wanted to. We can go to the springs and see it. So it's our job to protect it for ourselves, for future generations, for the irrigation, the farmers, and then also for the endangered species and their habitats, especially Comal and San Marcos Springs. I think it's very important that we protect the quality of it for all of us and for years to come. So one of the things that average people can do to protect the quality of the Edwards, and it's really basic, but it's easy to do. Pick up after your pets.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that's a big one.
So I heard New Braunfels has some signs that they put up where they're asking people to not feed the wildlife, the ducks, and pick up after their animals too.
Yeah, they're really trying to reduce the amount of bacteria in the water, and that's definitely one way.
Yeah, and that is to protect the water quality in the springs. So that's one way we're trying to do that. Another thing is don't litter. I mean, I know it's as basic, and we all know about it, but don't litter, because that little piece of paper or whatever can go into the storm drain or into the aquifer. And so we're trying to protect the quality. And something that we all can do as homeowners is not over-fertilize our lawns. I know we want that lush green grass, but then we have to think of the consequences of the future. And so that's one of the ways that we can, as average citizens, protect the water quality of the Edwards.
Nice.
Yeah, I would say that. I would say also the overuse of pesticides can be a problem, and not maintaining vehicles. So those little drips of oil, multiply that by millions of vehicles. That's a lot of oil that can run off into our watersheds. So all these things seem like small little changes, but just like conserving water, if everyone makes small little changes, all of a sudden you're protecting your watershed a lot more.
So basically, it's like the farther you can reach people and the more people you can reach, the bigger impact you can make on protecting the aquifer.
Yep, exactly.
And another way of doing that is a lot of these ideas Gizelle mentioned, like just cleaning up after your dogs. I mean, that's huge. You wouldn't think it, but if nobody's cleaning up after their dogs, that's a huge problem.
I know, gross. You think about it, that's gross.
All right, Gizelle, I was looking forward to this section. So 20 plus years of sampling. We want to hear about maybe some of your funniest or interesting stories from your work.
Okay, so this happened early on in my career. And so just to lay a little bit of foundation, I might be a field person, but I'm not into critters. I'm not into anything that's litters.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I know we've had also training on like wildlife and what's hazardous, what's not, and the colors on a snake. In my opinion, a snake is a snake.
Oh, same here, yes. Run away.
Exactly. I'm not going to look at what colors is touching what. A snake is a snake. So lay that foundation. So early in my career, a coworker and I, we went to a well in Uvalde, and so it's in the middle of nowhere, and it's right there by the river. So we were going to go sample a domestic well. And we got to the site, and so I got all my probes and my flow chamber, and I was going to go to the well. So when I approached the well, something on my right-hand side caught my attention. And so in reality, it may have been very small, but in my mind, it was like 10 feet long, 3 feet wide. It was a snake.
Yeah.
And so the snake looked at me. I looked at the snake. It slithered the other way. I ran to my truck. And so when I was in my truck, the other coworker comes around and goes, "Why are you running?" But when I was safe in my truck, I told him, "Well, there was a snake." He goes, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" And I told him, I said, "Look, if you see me running, run with me."
Yes. Yeah. Don't just stand there. Yes.
Exactly. He was the one who was standing there, yes.
He's like, what color is it? Is it?
And I'm like, I don't know. But when I was safe in my truck, that's when I told him, well, hey, there was a snake over there. So I'll never forget that day. But yeah, that is like my funniest thing that I've ever experienced out in the field. I've only experienced 2 snakes. And that was it. The other one was a rattlesnake, and I knew for sure.
Wow.
Yeah. So I just stayed away from it. I wasn't gonna. I mean, once you hear the rattle, you know. You don't.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you don't have to go investigate on that one.
Yeah.
So yes. But no, I've been really fortunate enough not to have too many encounters with wildlife. So that's been great.
Wow, that's a good one. Okay, so what about, sometimes I've seen, I think I saw it like not that long ago, where when you all open the well house, or like, and then there's just like spiders, just like, what is it?
There can be that. There can be a wasp nest.
Oh
there
my
can
gosh.
be snakes in there.
Yes. So one good piece of advice they told me early on in the career was, when you go to a well house, make sure you're always on the side of the door, and when you open it, you always follow the door. That way, if anything flies out.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, you're
I'd
not-
be like, let me, surprise.
Exactly. So no, we always follow the door. We always stand behind the door. That way it can fly out. Because one time I was gonna approach a well, and it was an open well. It was just open. And there was a vulture standing there. Well, it scared me. I scared it, and we both jumped. But it wasn't as dramatic as a snake. But yeah, no.
Yeah, one time early on in my career, I was sampling with Gizelle, and we were at Waco Springs, which is a pretty good-sized spring. And I was opening all these bottles. I was kind of nervous, and I dropped one of the caps of the bottle into the spring. And I hurriedly reached to grab it, lost my footing, and fell headfirst into the spring. And this was in February. It was cold out.
Oh my gosh. That's a story to remember for sure.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So good times sampling.
See, there you go. That's what people need to do to save, from something from floating down the river. It's just like jump in there and get it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was doing. I meant to do that. But yeah, there's just a lot of interesting time sampling, but it's such an important thing. And every year we produce a fact sheet that has the results from Gizelle's sampling efforts on this fact sheet. So any kind of detections that we have will be on there, all of our results, and a little bit of summary for that year.
Oh, nice.
So that usually comes out kind of late in the year for the previous year, and we've done that every year for the last 20 plus years.
Wow, that's great. So a lot of data,
Yes.
all right?
Yes.
And that's publicly accessible on our website on the science section. All right. Well, Gizelle, thank you so much for joining us today. We really enjoyed you visiting with us and talking to us about your illustrious career sampling
Yes.
You're welcome.
and some aspects about it. And we look forward to the next episode.
Thanks, Gizelle.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Recharge Zone podcast. Have questions, ideas for topics, or things you would like to share with us? Well, reach out to us at rechargezone@edwardsaquifer.org.